For today's video, we will be talking about China is in trouble, and here's why. Let's get started. No developing nation, including Sri Lanka, is being bankrupt by this. In China, the second largest economy in the world, this is the situation. After being unable to access or withdraw their life saving for months, Chinese residents are assaulting the bank. The situation first appeared in China. People are in a panic as the issue spreads across the nation, and they fear losing access to their hard-earned money. More information from the fraud investigation has now surfaced, suggesting that the con artist responsible for the Henan Bank scheme may have fled the country and obtained foreign citizenship. The $6 billion is missing. Deposits from banks is not being returned by the government. When the news becomes more popular in mainstream and social media in China, Chinese banks are under an increasing amount of pressure. These banks, including the Big Four, state-owned banks, are now thought to be less secure places to store cash. As people lose faith in the banks, it is very conceivable that China's financial systems will completely collapse. This might have a significant impact on both the local economy and the global economy. After the four tiny banks abruptly stopped allowing online cash withdrawals in April, their clients and Henan have been embroiled in a protracted legal battle. At first, banks use astronomically high interest rates to entice customers to transfer funds and advertise it as a rate with no risk. Additionally, banks used web marketing to draw in deposits from outside of China, avoiding Chinese banking regulations. Back in April, as a COVID spread, the house of cards began to fall apart, forcing banks to halt withdrawals in order to avoid going bankrupt. Banks stated that internet systems were being pulled offline for planned improvements in order to avoid a panic. However, it has been months and online services have not yet been restored. When depositors used an ATM to withdraw money, it initially appears to reject the transaction and finally disables the card due to fraud suspicion, all in an effort to prevent clients from taking their own money out. Customers' inability to access their money 3 months later has sparked a number of demonstrations and other actions. Later, we'll see how this panic is now affecting all of the Chinese financial industry, as well as other provinces. But let's first discuss the findings of the police inquiry. Authorities discovered a similarity among four banks in Henan, and that shared characteristic was Henan New Fortune Group, a shareholder in each of four businesses. They were the ones who pushed the limits in terms of following the banking restrictions. Local banks choose to advertise online to draw in additional deposits because the law forces them to remain inside their legal boundaries. They not only pushed the boundaries of who they could serve, but they also deceived customers with deceptive advertising. Many depositors who decided to do business with these banks were promised upwards for 4% interest on their deposits, but in reality, these consumers weren't really opening a new bank account. They were in fact investing in financial products. Two are completely different things that customers would learn later down the line. Remember these points, as this becomes a bigger issue when the CCP decides to get involved. On top of false advertising, these new deposits couldn't go to the banks. Henan's New Fortune Group concluded with banks' employees and made sure that consumers' deposits went straight to the shareholders' account. As authorities were made aware of these risky practices, they were quick to charge two executives with fraud. Authorities were able to arrest one executive, but the chairman of the company has since fled the country and is suspected that he has made his way into the United States. The $6 billion that consumers had deposited into the bank have left with him. The real headache for the authorities started at this point. Even if they wanted to refund the money, they are unable to. There was no Bernie Madoff-style scheme here. This was significantly worse than the Madoff scandal, in which the government was able to recoup the majority of the main deposits made by victims. But there is nothing left to recover in China's case. Banks quickly shut down their interest systems once all of the information became begun to surface. It gave many of their consumers a lot of trouble. Remember how I said because that these banks ran online advertisements to attract many of their depositors. This meant that when services went down, many of those clients were left in the dark. They had no idea why they couldn't access their money because they were stuck in completely different state or city. When some depositors went to Canon to collect their money, at the same time they encountered lengthy lineups and frozen funds. Some of these people believe these institutions to be safe places to store money. Thus, they had their entire life savings there. When there is no longer any hope, depositors made the decision to organize public protest in the hopes of attracting the attention of a helpful person. And they got the attention, but not the kind they were looking for. Within a few hours, large numbers of local security personnel appeared to disperse the demonstrators, admonishing them that their gathering was illegal and that they would be imprisoned if they refused to leave. Later, social media videos showed the situation growing violent. One video included an unnamed group of individuals dressed simply in black or white, whom many have assumed to be security personnel. They raced into the crowd, getting hit with water bottles and other things. Another video showed individuals being shoved and dragged down the steps by the same plainclothes men, with some protesters left with broken bones and eye injuries. Experts have pointed out that these plainclothes men are security forces sent by the government to shut down protests, but the power abuse does not stop there. To handle the increasing flow of demonstrators coming from various locations, more than 1,000 depositors' personal health apps had their codes altered by local officials to imply that they were very susceptible to having been exposed to COVID-19 and stop them from raising a scene. The word of the lower abuse spreading widely on social media just made the situation worse and heightened the public. What happened to the government backend insurance was one issue that was being asked about by everyone. Identical to the FDIC insurance that protests deposits up to $250,000 in the United States, China has its own system of protecting bank deposits. Many demonstrators and observers questioned why the insurance hadn't already paid out. Hold on tight because this is where the actual blaming starts. As I mentioned earlier, these banks promoted their services as regular deposits. Customers were actually purchasing money movement products, though deposit protection only applies to regular deposits, which makes it logical given the investments to include some risk. The only disappointing aspect is that all of these clients believed they were making regular installments and earning returns of 4%, only understanding they had been conned after the fact. Therefore, some clients made the decision to sue the banks in an effort to get their money back. The court essentially stated the bank cannot be held accountable because it was the workers, not the bank, who conspired with the Hanan investment company. With the common people suffer, everyone is just trying to pass the buck to the next guy. Right now, the CCP releases a statement to disperse the crowds. In fact, the CCP advised everyone to check the bank's financial records and financial statements before making a deposit. Make sure your money is always going into insured banks and not wealth management products to avoid falling for bogus advertising. As wealth management products are not insured, only deposits are. We suppose that the warning came a little too late. Currently, this story is going viral on social media. People's confidence in the security of their money in banks is beginning to wane. Viral posters advise people to take their money out and keep it at home. Now, if you are familiar with the modern banking system, you can understand why that's bad news for any economy. The majority of nations practice fractional reserve banking. Here's how it works. Let's imagine that the central bank decides to set the reserve reserve requirement at 10%. Consequently, each time you deposit $100 in a bank, only $10 or 10% of that must be kept in the bank's vault. Because of this, the bank will take the extra $90 and lend it to anyone in need of a loan. Let's say I am granted the loan for $90. Now I'm going to spend those $90 on a new microphone for my studio. Now that the person who sold me the microphone has $90, he chooses to deposit it in a bank. Now that the bank is only required to keep 10% of it, or $9, they will lend the remaining $81 in a very basic terms. This is how our modern economy functions. The cycle will just keep repeating itself. But keep in mind that everything in our hypothetical example began with simple $100. The bank was able to generate $1,000 in circulation from the $100. The bank falls as a result of everyone who placed the money attempting to withdraw it all at once, if an excessive number of people attempt to withdraw cash. Just to be clear, we oversimplified a fairly complex subject here, but we think you get the idea. Everything is based on trust. People must be able to put their faith in banks to keep their money secure. The FDIC ensures deposits made in this country to maintain confidence in the system, but China's bank insurance declined to pay out compensation to victims. For Chinese citizens, that trust is beginning to fade. People are now unsure as to whether banks are a secure location to keep their hard-earned money. The prospect of a bank run is rising quickly as panic spreads across China. China's third biggest state-owned bank, the China Agriculture Bank, has already restricted withdrawals. Customers can only withdraw about $150 per day at the moment, and most online activity has been suspended. The pressure on Chinese financial institutions will only grow as things get worse. If not handled correctly, this could severely harm China's already fragile economy. On a balance sheet, the Chinese banking sector accounts for 35% of China's GDP, which is significant. However, the American system is only 100%. Banks make up 7 of the top 10 most profitable firms in China. To put it mildly, China is extremely dependent on its financial institutions, only after knowledge has spread too widely to be hidden, and protests showed no signs of calming down. The authorities were forced to yield. Chinese authorities have declared that they will begin compensating the majority of the victims, however, only up to $7,400, by using its checkbook more liberally to appease citizens. The government is attempting to restore social stability, but this creates a whole new set of problems. The majority of these clients had invested their whole life savings in these banks. For some people, the amount was in the millions of dollars. Will 7,400 or 50,000 yuan suffice to pacify these victims? Where will this money come from has been a question on the minds of observers. Many people contend that using tax funds to repay people is unfair. Whatever happens, if managed improperly, this does have the potential to become nuclear. If the general public loses faith in banks' independence or government assistance in the case of a liquidity crisis, it might lead to the precise kind of disaster that the government is attempting to avert. What did our topic educate you on? Please keep your thoughts in the space provided below. Please click the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to Wealth-ology for more videos like this. Thank you for stopping by to watch. See you in our next video.